The ghost of the Atlantic. The war was over, or so everyone believed. May 1945 had brought the unconditional surrender of Nazi Germany, and the Atlantic Ocean finally seemed safe after 6 years of relentless U-boat warfare. Allied merchant vessels began sailing without the massive convoy escorts that had protected them throughout the conflict. The sailors breathed easier, believing the wolf packs had been tamed forever. Commander James Hartley stood on the bridge of the HMS Resolute, a destroyer that had survived the entire war. His weathered face bore the scars of countless depth charge attacks and torpedo evasions. At 42, he felt ancient, worn down by years of hunting German submarines through the treacherous North Atlantic waters. Now, in September 1945, he was escorting a small convoy of merchant ships carrying reconstruction supplies to England. "Beautiful day, sir," remarked Lieutenant Morrison, the young officer who had joined them just before Germany's surrender. The sea was unusually calm, with gentle swells rolling beneath a clear autumn sky. "Too beautiful," Hartley muttered, his instincts prickling with unease. He had learned never to trust the Atlantic's temperament. At 1,430 hours, the radio crackled with a distress call. The SS Merchant Prince, sailing 200 miles to their north, had been torpedoed. Hartley's blood ran cold. It was impossible. All German U-boats had been accounted for, either sunk, captured, or surrendered according to the armistice terms. "Give me confirmation," he ordered sharply. "Check if this is some kind of drill or mistake." But there was no mistake. Within the hour, reports flooded in from multiple sources. The Merchant Prince had gone down in 8 minutes, her back broken by a single torpedo strike. 47 men were dead. The few survivors spoke of a periscope cutting through the water, a white wake, and then the devastating explosion that split their ship in two. The Admiralty's response was immediate and dismissive. "Mine," they declared. "Drifting wartime mine. Unfortunate, but these things happen. No U-boats remain operational." Hartley didn't believe it for a second. He had hunted U-boats for 5 years. He knew the difference between a mine strike and a torpedo attack. The survivors' accounts were too specific, too detailed. Someone was out there, still hunting. 3 days later, another ship went down. The Norwegian freighter Nordstjernen, carrying timber from Canada, exploded and sank in the pre-dawn darkness. This time, there were no survivors, but a nearby fishing trawler reported seeing what looked like a submarine silhouette slipping beneath the waves just after the explosion. The Admiralty convened an emergency meeting. How could a U-boat still be operational? Every single vessel in the Kriegsmarine had been cataloged. The surrender had been comprehensive. Admiral Cunningham himself reviewed the records, his face growing grave as he realized the impossible truth. "U-507, he said finally, pointing to a file marked with a red stamp. "Commanded by Captain Lieutenant Heinrich von Brandt. Last reported position was here." He tapped the chart. "In April 1945. We dropped 43 depth charges on her. Every ship in the task force reported oil slicks, debris, and wreckage. She was confirmed destroyed." "Then how?" someone asked. Hartley leaned forward, studying the chart. The 2 recent sinkings formed a pattern, a hunting ground. Someone was out there, someone who hadn't gotten the message that the war was over. Or perhaps someone who didn't care. "Permission to hunt, sir," Hartley said quietly. The Admiral nodded slowly. "Permission granted. Find this ghost, Commander, and send it to hell where it belongs." The hunter becomes the hunted. The HMS Resolute cut through the gray Atlantic swells, her crew tense and alert despite the war supposedly being over. Commander Hartley had handpicked 20 men from volunteers who had anti-submarine warfare experience. They knew what they were hunting, even if it seemed impossible. Sonar contact. The call came at 0340 hours on September 18th, jolting the crew to action stations. Bearing 270, range 3,000 yards. Submerged contact, moving slow. Hartley grabbed the intercom. "This is not a drill. All hands to battle stations. I repeat, this is not a drill." The destroyer heeled over as they turned toward the contact. In the sonar room, Petty Officer Davies hunched over his equipment, his experienced ears filtering through the ocean's cacophony. Definite submarine, sir. She's running deep, maybe 200 feet. Diesel-electric signature consistent with Type 9 U-boat. How is that possible? Morrison whispered. The war's been over for 4 months. Tell that to whoever's down there. Hartley replied grimly. Load depth charges. Set pattern Alpha 7. I want those charges at 150 and 250 feet. The Resolute accelerated, her engines straining as they closed the distance. Hartley had done this dance 100 times before, but never had it felt so surreal. They were supposed to be going home, supposed to be done with killing. Yet here they were, hunting a ghost that refused to die. Contact, diving deeper, Davies reported. She knows we're here, sir. She's trying to get beneath the thermocline. Clever, Hartley thought. The thermocline, a layer where water temperature changed dramatically, could scatter sonar waves, making detection nearly impossible. But he had anticipated this move. Fire pattern, he ordered. 6 depth charges rolled off the Resolute's stern, dark cylinders tumbling into the gray water. They disappeared beneath the surface, sinking rapidly toward their preset depths. Hartley counted in his head. 10 seconds. 20. 30. The ocean erupted. 6 massive explosions sent columns of water towering into the air. The Resolute shook from the concussions, and men grabbed for handholds as the shock waves passed beneath the hull. Maintain course, Hartley commanded. Davies, report. Contact lost in the turbulence, sir. Waiting for the water to settle. They circled, every man straining to see any evidence of a kill. Oil slicks, debris, bodies, anything that would confirm they had destroyed their target. But the ocean revealed nothing, keeping its secrets close. There, Morrison shouted, pointing off the port bow. Periscope. Hartley spun, but saw nothing. Are you certain? I think so, sir. Just for a moment. Had it been wishful thinking? Or had the U-boat survived and brazenly surfaced to observe them? Hartley felt a chill run down his spine. If the submarine had survived that depth charge pattern, her commander was either incredibly lucky or incredibly skilled. Sir, I have her again, Davies called out. Bearing 320, range 4,000 yards and opening. She's running, sir. Fast. The hunt was on. For the next 6 hours, they pursued the contact across 50 miles of ocean. The U-boat's commander proved masterful, using every trick in the book. He changed depths constantly, altered course unpredictably, and used the ocean's natural sounds to mask his vessel's movements. At 1,100 hours, exhausted and frustrated, Hartley finally lost contact completely. The submarine had vanished as if it had never existed. He slammed his fist against the chart table, making the young officers jump. She's still out there, he said quietly, and she's laughing at us. That night, as the Resolute headed toward their patrol sector, the radio brought grim news. Another ship had been sunk, this time the American Liberty ship Samuel F. Harrison. The attack had occurred 60 miles from where they had lost the U-boat contact. 28 men were missing, presumed dead. The ghost was real, and it was still hunting. Von Brandt's oath. Deep beneath the Atlantic's surface, U-507 crept through the darkness like a steel predator. The submarine's interior was cramped, humid, and reeked of diesel fuel, unwashed bodies, and fear. Captain Lieutenant Heinrich von Brandt stood in the control room, his gaunt face illuminated by the red emergency lighting they had been using for months to conserve their failing batteries. Diving officer, level at 100 meters, he ordered, his voice steady despite the exhaustion that pulled at his bones. 100 meters, Hercule, came the response. Von Brandt was 36 years old, but looked 60. His blonde hair had gone gray at the temples, and deep lines etched his face. He had not seen sunlight properly in over 5 months, not since that day in April when the world had tried to kill him and his crew. Chief, status report. He called down to the engine room. Chief Engineer Klaus Hoffman appeared in the doorway, his hands black with grease. We're holding together, Kalu, but barely. The port diesel is completely gone. The starboard is running at maybe 60% capacity. We have enough fuel for perhaps 2 more weeks of operations, if we're careful. And the torpedoes? 4 remaining. Two forward, two aft. Von Brandt nodded slowly. For torpedoes. For more chances to strike at the enemy before you. 507 became nothing more than an iron coffin drifting in the depths. They told us the war was over, Lieutenant Werner Krauss said quietly. He was the boat's first officer, a former schoolteacher who had volunteered in 1939 with dreams of glory. Those dreams had long since rotted away. We heard the broadcasts, Kalu. Germany has surrendered. Germany has surrendered, von Brandt agreed. But we have not. The words hung in the stale air. The crew, what remained of them, watched their commander with a mixture of devotion and doubt. They had followed him through hell. They had survived depth charge attacks that should have crushed them. They had endured starvation, disease, and madness in the endless darkness. But why were they still fighting? Von Brandt turned to face his men. I know what you're thinking. I know some of you want to surface, to surrender, to go home. He paused, letting the words sink in. But there is no home. Not anymore. He pulled out a worn letter, its edges frayed from countless readings. This reached me just before our last patrol. My wife, my children. His voice cracked, but he forced himself to continue. Dresden. They were in Dresden when the bombs fell. The firestorm took everything. The crew looked away, unable to meet their commander's eyes. They all had similar stories. Cities reduced to rubble. Families scattered or dead. A homeland occupied and divided by the victors. The Allies say they fought for freedom, for justice, von Brandt continued, his voice growing harder. But they burned our cities. They killed our families. Women, children. And now they celebrate their victory while our nation bleeds. But continuing to fight won't bring them back, Krauss said softly. No, von Brandt agreed. But it will make them remember. It will make them pay. Every ship we sink is a reminder that Germany does not die easily, that we do not forget. He moved to the chart table, spreading out their carefully maintained navigation plots. We have fuel, we have torpedoes, and we have the skill to use them. The Allies think the war is over. They sail without escorts, without precautions. They are vulnerable. They're mostly merchant ships now, Krauss objected. Civilian vessels carrying reconstruction supplies. Not military targets. Von Brandt's eyes flashed. They supported the war effort that destroyed our country. Every rivet, every bolt, every plank of wood in those ships helped build the bombers that murdered our families. They're all guilty. The logic was twisted, born from grief and rage. But in the suffocating darkness of U-507, it made a terrible kind of sense. The crew had lost everything. This submarine, this mission of revenge, it was all they had left. So we continue, von Brandt said firmly. We hunt, we kill, and we make them remember that the Kriegsmarine died with honor, fighting to the last. Jol, Herko. The crew responded, though some voices carried more conviction than others. As the men returned to their stations, Krauss lingered. How long? Heinrich, he asked, using his commander's first name for the first time in years. How long can we keep this up? Von Brandt stared at the bulkhead, seeing through it to the vast ocean beyond. Until the torpedoes run out, he said quietly, or until they finally send us to join our families in the deep. The pattern emerges. The Admiralty's operational room in Portsmouth buzzed with activity that hadn't been seen since VE Day. A massive chart of the North Atlantic dominated one wall, with red pins marking the locations of recent sinkings. Admiral Sir Charles Cunningham stood before it, his face grave as he studied the emerging pattern. 7 ships in 5 weeks, he said, his voice cutting through the chatter. 53 men dead, and we still haven't confirmed what's hunting them. Commander Hartley stood beside him, having been summoned from the Resolute for this emergency conference. Around the table sat representatives from Naval Intelligence, the Royal Canadian Navy, and the United States Navy. The Americans were particularly concerned. 2 of the sunk vessels had been their Liberty ships. Commander Hartley, Cunningham said, you've had direct contact with this phantom. What's your assessment? Hartley stepped forward, pointing to the red pins on the chart. It's U-507, sir. I'm certain of it. The attack pattern, the tactics employed, the way she evaded our depth charges. It's all consistent with a highly experienced U-boat commander. Not some desperate sailor with a death wish, but a professional who knows exactly what he's doing. But U-507 was confirmed destroyed, objected Captain Reynolds from Naval Intelligence. We have eyewitness reports of her destruction. Oil slicks, debris, the works. Then the reports were wrong, Hartley replied bluntly. Or Von Brandt was clever enough to fake his death. It wouldn't be the first time a U-boat commander pulled that trick. Commander Patricia Wells, one of the few women in the room and a brilliant strategic analyst, spoke up. If we assume it is U-507, we need to understand Von Brandt's psychology. What's motivating him? She opened a file. Heinrich von Brandt, age 36. Career officer, highly decorated. Knight's Cross with oak leaves. Credited with sinking 42 Allied vessels. But here's what's interesting. His family was killed in the Dresden bombing. The room fell silent. Dresden, the name itself carried weight, representing one of the war's most controversial episodes. He has nothing to lose, Wells continued. No home to return to, no family waiting. For him, the war never ended because his personal war is against us, against those he blames for his family's death. So he's on a suicide mission, an American officer said. No, Hartley interjected. If it were suicide, he would have gone out in a blaze of glory months ago. He's surviving, hunting, evading. He wants to inflict maximum damage before the end comes. That makes him more dangerous than a suicide mission. He's a predator with nothing to lose, but every reason to survive just one more day. Cunningham traced a line connecting the sinkings. There's a pattern here. He's moving northwest, following the main shipping lanes, but staying just outside the most heavily trafficked areas. He's picking off isolated vessels, ones that won't be immediately missed. Smart, Hartley admitted grudgingly. By the time we realize a ship is missing, he's already 100 miles away, hunting his next target. Can we predict his next move? Cunningham asked. Wells studied the chart for a long moment. He'll need to surface soon for air and to charge batteries. U-boats can't stay submerged indefinitely. If we can determine where he's likely to surface, we could set a trap. The problem, Hartley said, is that the Atlantic is very, very big. We could deploy every ship we have and still miss him. We need to think like he thinks. What would I do if I were Von Brandt? He moved closer to the chart, his finger hovering over the ocean. I'm low on fuel, probably low on torpedoes. My crew is exhausted, possibly sick. My submarine is damaged from depth charge near misses. I can't make it back to Germany. The British and Americans control those waters absolutely. South America? Possibly, but that's a long journey. There, Wells said suddenly, pointing to a spot on the chart. Iceland. Specifically, the waters around Iceland. Remote, lots of fog, treacherous navigation that would keep Allied ships cautious. And there are enough merchant vessels passing through that he'd have targets. Cunningham nodded slowly. It's speculation, but it's good speculation. Commander Hartley, you're familiar with those waters? Intimately, sir. Spent 2 winters patrolling them during the war. Then you'll lead the task force. I'm assigning you 3 additional destroyers, a frigate, and a Sunderland flying boat for aerial reconnaissance. Your orders are simple. Find U-507 and sink her. No more ghost stories. No more phantom submarine. I want confirmed wreckage and bodies. Am I clear? Crystal clear, sir. As the meeting broke up, Wells approached Hartley. Commander, a word? They stepped aside, and she lowered her voice. I've been reading Von Brandt's service record in detail. He's not just a good commander. He's exceptional. He thinks 3 moves ahead. If we're predicting he'll go to Iceland, there's a chance he's already considered that we'd make that prediction. You think it's a trap? I think you should be very, very careful. Von Brandt has survived this long by being smarter than everyone hunting him. Don't underestimate him. Hartley nodded grimly. I don't intend to. The trap is set. The waters around Iceland were living up to their reputation for hostility. Sleet lashed the HMS Resolute's bridge as Commander Hartley scanned the gray horizon through binoculars that kept fogging up. It was October now, and the North Atlantic was showing its teeth. Bloody miserable, Lieutenant Morrison muttered, pulling his oilskin coat tighter against the wind. Hard to believe anyone could survive in these conditions. That's exactly why Von Brandt might choose them, Hartley replied. Visibility is terrible, which means our aerial reconnaissance is useless. The rough seas make sonar unreliable, and most commanders would avoid operating here, which makes it perfect for a submarine that doesn't want to be found. The task force had been in position for 3 days. Four destroyers formed a loose perimeter around the primary shipping lanes, while the frigate HMS Ardent patrolled closer to the Icelandic coast. They had established a pattern, appearing to be a routine convoy escort, while actually setting an elaborate trap. The bait was the merchant ship SS Perseverance, an old freighter that looked vulnerable but was actually carrying a skeleton crew and a hold full of empty barrels. If Von Brandt took the bait and attacked, the destroyers would converge from all sides, trapping him with no escape route. "Signal from Ardent, sir," the communications officer called out. "They report possible sonar contact, bearing 140, range uncertain. Contact is intermittent." Hartley's pulse quickened. "Tell them to maintain position, but go to silent running. I don't want to spook him if it's really there." The hours crawled by. The storm intensified, waves crashing over the Resolute's bow and sending spray across the bridge. In these conditions, maintaining formation was treacherous enough without the added stress of hunting a submarine. "Sir," Davies called from the sonar room, "I've got something. Very faint, could be biological, but no, there's a mechanical component. Diesel engine, running slow. Bearing 165, range approximately 5,000 yards. That's almost directly beneath Perseverance's route," Morrison said, checking the plot. "He's positioning himself for an attack." Hartley made his decision. "Signal all ships. Execute Operation Hammer. Move to intercept positions but maintain radio silence. I want him to think Perseverance is alone until it's too late." The destroyers began their carefully choreographed movement, closing in from 3 sides while leaving what appeared to be an escape route to the northwest, a route that actually led straight into a minefield they had quietly laid 2 days earlier. On the Perseverance, Captain Thomas Webb, a retired naval officer who had volunteered for this dangerous mission, watched the seas with experienced eyes. His skeleton crew of 15 men knew they were bait, knew that a German torpedo could end their lives in seconds. But they also knew that this might be their chance to end the mysterious sinkings once and for all. "Contact is rising," Davies reported on the Resolute. "He's coming up to periscope depth." In the depths below, Von Brandt studied the freighter through his periscope. She was old, slow, and apparently unescorted. An easy target. Too easy? "Something's wrong," he murmured to Krauss, who stood beside him in the cramped control room. "Kalu, look at her. She's sitting too high in the water. Either she's empty or she's carrying something very light." Von Brandt's eyes narrowed. "And where are the other ships? In 3 weeks of hunting, I haven't seen a single vessel traveling completely alone. Perhaps they finally believe the threat is over," Krauss suggested. "Or perhaps they want us to think that." Von Brandt stepped back from the periscope. "Sound officer, full sweep. I want to know if there's anything else out there." The sound operator pressed his headphones tighter, listening intently to the ocean's symphony. For several minutes, there was nothing but the usual sounds, wave action, the distant groan of ice, biological noise. Then, "Herculu, I have propeller sounds. Multiple contacts. They're running slow, but they're there. 3. No, for separate vessels. They're surrounding us." Von Brandt's face remained calm, but his mind raced. It was a trap, a well-laid trap that he had almost sailed straight into. The question now was how to escape it. "Chief, I need everything the engines can give us. Lieutenant Krauss, plot me a course that takes us away from all those contacts. Diving officer, take us down to 200 meters. 200 meters, Herculu. The hull will hold," Von Brandt said firmly. "It has to." On the Resolute, Davies suddenly called out, "Contact diving." He's going deep and fast, bearing now 170 and diverging from Perseverance. "Sir, I think he's made us." "Damn." Hartley slammed his fist down. "All ships converge on last known position. We can't let him slip away again." The trap was sprung, but the prey had seen it coming. Now, it became a race. Could the destroyers close in before U-507 could escape into the vast Atlantic? The hunt was about to become deadly serious. Depths of desperation. U-507 groaned and shuddered as she descended into the abyss. The pressure gauge climbed steadily. 150 meters, 175, 200. Every rivet, every weld, every seam in the submarine's hull was being tested beyond its design limits. Hull integrity critical. Hercule, Chief Hoffman reported, his voice tight with tension. We're at maximum safe depth. Go to 250, Von Brandt ordered calmly. Kalu, the hull won't. 250 meters, Chief. Now. Hoffman exchanged glances with the diving officer, but complied. The submarine tilted nose down, and the depth gauge continued its relentless climb. Around them, the steel hull began to emit sounds that no submariner ever wanted to hear. Creaks, groans, and occasional sharp pops as rivets strained against the crushing pressure of the ocean above. At 225 meters, a pipe joint burst in the engine room, spraying oily water across the compartment. Men scrambled to seal it while others worked the manual bilge pumps, fighting to keep the incoming water at bay. Sealing the leak now, Hoffman called, but we can't take much more of this. On the surface, the four destroyers converged on U-507's last known position. The seas were still rough, but Hartley ordered depth charges anyway. They couldn't let Von Brandt escape again. Fire pattern, he commanded. The first spread of depth charges tumbled into the water, set for 150 and 200 feet. The explosions sent massive plumes of water skyward, and the shock waves radiated through the ocean like invisible hammers. Below, the U-507's crew felt each detonation. The lights flickered. Men were thrown from their feet. A locker broke free from its mounting and crashed across the control room. Damage report, Von Brandt snapped. Reports flooded in from every section. More leaks, electrical failures, a cracked battery casing that was leaking chlorine gas into the forward torpedo room. The submarine was dying around them, piece by piece. Hercule, Krauss said quietly, drawing Von Brandt aside. We can't survive much more of this. Perhaps it's time to consider alternatives. Surrender? Von Brandt's eyes blazed. Never. Not surrender. But we could slip away, head for neutral waters, internment instead of death. There is no neutral anymore, Werner. You know that. The moment we surface, they'll either capture us or sink us. And I won't give them the satisfaction of parading us as trophies. Another spread of depth charges exploded, closer this time. A section of piping ruptured, and steam filled the engine compartment. Two men were scalded before they could seal off the broken pipe. Sir, we've lost the port electric motor, Hoffman reported, and the starboard is overheating. We can't maintain this speed. Von Brandt studied the chart, his mind working through possibilities and probabilities. They were running out of options. The destroyers above knew roughly where they were and were methodically saturating the area with depth charges. Going deeper would crush them. Going shallower would make them an easier target. Running would drain their remaining batteries before they could escape the kill zone. But there was one option they might not expect. Cut engines to 1/4 speed, he ordered. Stop all unnecessary equipment. I want us as quiet as possible. Kalu, we're going to hide among the dead. He pointed to a section of the chart. These waters are littered with wrecks. Torpedoed freighters, bombed escorts, U-boats that didn't make it home. Their debris creates false sonar contacts. We're going to find a wreck and sit right next to it. Let our metal signature blend with theirs. It was desperate, but desperation was all they had left. The U-507 crept forward through the darkness, her sound operator listening for the telltale echo that would indicate a large metallic object on the seafloor. Contact, the sound operator whispered. Large wreck, bearing 090, sitting at 210 meters. Sounds like a substantial vessel. Take us there. Nice and slow. I don't want them hearing us move. Above, on the Resolute, Davies frowned at his sonar display. Sir, contact is fading. Either he's slowed down significantly, or he's found some way to mask his signature. Keep searching, Hartley ordered. He's down there somewhere. A submarine that size can't just vanish. But that was exactly what U-507 appeared to do. As the submarine settled onto the seabed next to the rusting hulk of a wartime freighter, Von Brandt ordered all non-essential systems shut down. The crew sat in darkness, breathing as quietly as possible, while above them the destroyers crisscrossed the area, dropping depth charges that exploded like distant thunder. Hours passed. The air grew stale and thick with carbon dioxide. Men began to show signs of oxygen deprivation, headaches, dizziness, confusion. But still, Von Brandt waited. "How long can we stay like this?" a young sailor whispered. "As long as it takes," Von Brandt replied. "They'll eventually have to leave to refuel. When they do, we'll slip away." But the destroyers didn't leave. Hartley, suspecting that Von Brandt might try exactly this tactic, maintained his patrol pattern, slowly expanding the search area, but never completely abandoning it. In the suffocating darkness of U-507, the crew faced their greatest challenge yet. Not the enemy above, but the enemy within. The air itself slowly becoming poisonous, the cold seeping into their bones, and the crushing knowledge that their options were running out. Breaking point. The situation aboard U-507 had become critical. After 18 hours on the seafloor, the submarine's atmosphere was toxic. Carbon dioxide levels were dangerously high, and oxygen was depleting rapidly. Men gasped for breath, their lips turning blue, their thinking becoming slow and confused. "Kalu," Chief Hoffman whispered, his voice weak, "we have to surface. Another few hours, and we'll all suffocate down here." Von Brandt sat slumped against the periscope housing, his own breathing labored. He knew Hoffman was right, but surfacing meant death of a different kind, capture or destruction at the hands of the destroyers still prowling above. "Status on the batteries?" he asked. "Maybe 30 minutes of operation left. Enough to get us to the surface, but not enough to run if they spot us." A young sailor, barely 18, Von Brandt recalled, began to sob quietly. Others stared into space with vacant eyes, their minds shutting down from lack of oxygen. The crew that had followed him so loyally, that had trusted him to keep them alive, was dying around him. "Werner," Von Brandt said to Kraus, "honest assessment. If we surface, what are our chances?" Kraus, always the pragmatist, considered carefully. "In this weather? With limited visibility? We might make it if we surface quietly, run on the diesel for 30 minutes to charge batteries and clear the air, then dive again before they can pinpoint us. But it's a tremendous risk. Everything we've done for the past 5 months has been a tremendous risk," Von Brandt replied. He looked around at his dying crew. "We surface. 1 hour of running time. If we're spotted, we dive immediately and trust our luck one more time." The decision made, the crew slowly came to life. It took nearly 20 minutes to prepare. At this oxygen level, everything moved in slow motion. Finally, they were ready. "Surface," Von Brandt ordered. The submarine's ballast tanks blew with a roar that seemed deafening after so many hours of silence. U-507 rose from the seabed, leaving behind the wreck that had sheltered them, and climbed toward the storm-tossed surface. On HMS Resolute, Davies jerked upright. "Contact. Submarine surfacing, bearing 345, range 4,000 yards. Sound general quarters." Hartley shouted. "Oh, the head full. Signal other ships. We have her." But the weather was on Von Brandt's side. The storm had intensified during the night, with visibility down to a few hundred yards. By the time the Resolute reached U-507's projected position, the submarine had vanished into the murk. U-507's diesel engine coughed to life, and precious air flooded into the submarine. Men gasped and gulped the fresh, cold air like drowning victims reaching the surface. The hatches were opened just enough to create ventilation, and the batteries began to charge. "How long do we have, Chief?" Von Brandt asked, standing on the bridge with binoculars, scanning for the enemy he knew was closing in. "We need at least an hour for a proper charge. 40 minutes minimum to make it worthwhile." "You have 30, Von Brandt said, spotting a dark shape emerging from the rain squall. "We have company." The shape resolved into a destroyer, her bow cutting through the waves as she turned toward them. She was close, too close. They had been spotted. "Dive, dive, dive," Von Brandt shouted, dropping down the hatch. The diesel engine cut off, the hatches slammed shut, and U-507 tilted nose down. But they were sluggish, the tanks still partially full of air, the boat heavy from water in the bilges. On Resolute, Hartley watched the submarine's conning tower disappear beneath the waves. "Range, 2,000 yards, sir. She's diving, but she's slow. Fire full spread. I want depth charges at 50 feet intervals from 50 to 300 feet. Saturate the area." 20 depth charges rolled from the Resolute's stern and were hurled from her side throwers. The ocean erupted in a sustained barrage that went on for nearly a minute. The explosions churned the water white, and the Resolute herself shook from the concussions. Below, U-507 was hammered. The first charge exploded close enough to cave in a section of the outer hull. The second knocked out the electrical system completely, plunging the submarine into absolute darkness. The third cracked the pressure hull, and water began flooding into the engine room. "We're sinking," Hoffman screamed over the chaos. "I can't stop the flooding." Von Brandt felt the deck tilting beneath him, felt the submarine beginning its final plunge into the abyss. This was it. This was how it ended. And yet, even now, he felt no regret. He had made them pay. He had made them remember. "All hands," he said calmly into the emergency voice tube, knowing it was probably dead, but trying anyway. "It has been an honor to serve with you. You are the finest crew a commander could ask for. We die as we lived, fighting for the fatherland." But Chief Hoffman wasn't ready to die. He fought through the flooding engine room, reached the main ballast blow controls, and pulled them with the last of his strength. Emergency compressed air, the final reserve, blasted into the ballast tanks. U-507 shuddered, hesitated, then began to rise. "She's surfacing," Davies called. "She's blown her tanks." The submarine broke the surface at a steep angle, water cascading from her hull. Her conning tower hatch flew open, and men began to pour out, hands raised in surrender. Hartley watched through his binoculars as the German sailors emerged. They looked like ghosts, pale, emaciated, barely able to stand. But they were alive. And then he saw him. Captain Lieutenant Heinrich von Brandt, standing on the tilting conning tower, watching his crew abandon the dying submarine. He made no move to join them. "Signal him to abandon ship," Hartley ordered. But von Brandt simply stood there, rigid and unmoving, as U-507 began her final descent.